Hey everyone, in this video we wanted to spend a little time talking about fiber because it's one of those things in nutrition where there's a lot of ideas around about, how it impacts health and what it's all about. And a lot of those ideas are controversial. So we just kind of wanted to take a little time to give our own thoughts on some of the more controversial ideas on fiber out there.
Yeah, so Ray Pete. We'll
Okay.
start there. I have a little more background in the alternative health scene than Alex does, so I know his theories a little better. So what do you think about fiber leading to excess endotoxins?
I think that's silly. So endotoxins are produced by the microbes in your intestinal tract, primarily in response to digesting starches. And when I say starches, I mean like digestible starches that make it all the way down there for whatever reason. When you look,
That's more acellular, right?
yeah, like flours, acellular carbohydrates. Now, when you look at fiber, it's pretty consistent that fermentable fibers and resistant starches lead to enhanced intestinal integrity and reduce the production of endotoxins. So not only do you have less endotoxin production by the microbiome, but you have a stronger intestinal barrier that prevents those endotoxins from translocating through the intestinal cells and entering into circulation. So the idea that fiber could somehow enhance endotoxemia just isn't supported in the literature in intervention studies that use fiber supplements in humans, or just on a mechanistic basis. Like, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, that's mainly their argument is through mechanistic.
Okay, well, I don't know how they could make that argument then, because the mechanisms don't really line up. So yeah.
So they say that excess fiber leads to increased serotonin, which increases endotoxins, or increased endotoxins leads to excess serotonin. From
Yeah.
gut irritation from the fiber.
Yeah, so I mean, again, the fiber doesn't cause gut irritation per se. Like, your gut's not going to be irritated by the fiber. Yeah, if you have like some type of intestinal pathology, then insoluble fibers could probably interact with that to irritate it, but that's not most people. And serotonin is produced by the gut microbiome. It's one of the metabolites produced by the microbiome when they ferment fibrous substrate. They do produce serotonin, and that serotonin works primarily locally to increase the motility of the gut and help get stuff moving through, which is one of the reasons why fiber helps keep you regular, because serotonin increases peristalsis and the movement of food through the intestinal tract.
And that's why the whole theory doesn't make sense, because usually they say that people are constipated because of low thyroid, right?
Yeah.
And so that's how they build up excess serotonin and endotoxins.
Okay, so
their arguments are opposite. I don't know if you're following.
It sounds like they're a little conflicted. Like,
they don't
fiber increases endotoxemia, which reduces thyroid activity, which reduces peristalsis, which increases endotoxemia.
But they're saying that the individuals have high serotonin, which would increase transit time, not decrease it.
Which would increase transit time. And if that serotonin is formed in the intestinal tract, it comes about from fermenting fiber, which reduces endotoxemia and increases intestinal barriers. So yeah, that doesn't make much sense. But there is also data that the serotonin does enter into circulation, where it can have some peripheral effects. The practical relevance of those peripheral effects is so far unknown. Like, for example, when serotonin binds to your fat cells, it can increase fat synthesis, but to what extent remains unknown. And
it's just hypothetical.
Yeah, and we do know that serotonin can't cross the blood-brain barrier, so it's not going to be able to get into your brain and
make
affect,
you agitated.
or irritated or happy. Like it's just, it can't do that.
I think that a lot of them conflate like intestinal inflammation with a mind state. Of course, we all feel like shit and get anxious when our gut is like not working right.
Yeah, and part of that's because of some of the metabolites they produce, like short-chain fatty acids. Those do cross the blood-brain barrier, and they do affect inflammation throughout the body. Short-chain fatty acids are strongly anti-inflammatory throughout the body, and they have very strong cytotoxic effects on like cancer cells, for example. And so if you have a high fermentable fiber diet, then some of those metabolites, like the short-chain fatty acids, could very well explain the link between dysbiosis and neurological conditions like depression. We know that there's a gut-brain axis, but it's not from the neurotransmitters produced in the gut, because those can't make it past the blood-brain barrier. It's from other metabolites like short-chain fatty acids, butyrate, propionate, acetate. Those do, and those can impact neurological function.
So what are your thoughts on the carnivore diet and the microbiome?
I think that there's a huge misunderstanding there about the essentiality of fiber. Fiber is not essential for survival. Like, that's true.
Neither are carbs.
Yeah, it's not. Fiber is not an essential nutrient. But that doesn't mean that
it's optimal.
Yeah, that doesn't mean that, eating a low fiber diet is optimal for health. And we have a lot of data showing benefits of fiber, especially fermentable fibers, on intestinal health and whole body systemic health. Focusing just on the intestines, because that's where the data is really not controversial at all. Like, it's very well investigated. I think that people that eat a zero or very low fiber diet are putting themselves at a huge increased risk of long-term problems, because we have animal studies showing that when you go on low fiber, zero fiber diets for enough period of time, the beneficial microbes that normally feed on that fiber die off, like, completely. They go extinct, which means that anytime you then reintroduce fiber later in your life, you're always going to have problems with it, like gas and bloating, because you don't have the right bacteria present.
As seen in anyone that followed the GAPS diet, 10 years ago. Like, they all had that issue when they reintroduced fiber.
Yeah, because the bacteria...
And they're still having issues.
Yeah, the bacteria that normally eat it, they start to die off because they don't have any food. Now, if they don't die off completely, then given enough time, you can build them back up and just experience that discomfort for, I don't know, some amount of time before they reestablish their colonies. But if you extinct them completely, like these animal studies suggest, then you're never going to get them back unless you do like a fecal transplant.
And you're constantly going to be chasing that perfect gut protocol.
Yeah. And on top of that, aside from that long-term issue, we know that these beneficial microbes produce butyrate, which binds to the nicotinic acid receptor on the apical side of the intestinal epithelial cells. That's the side, like, in the tube, right? It's not the side facing the blood. It's in the lumen, the side facing where all the food sits and where all the microbes sit. Those receptors only exist on that side. So they're not going to be bound to by any beta-hydroxybutyrate floating around in your blood from being in a ketogenic state. It has to come from the inside of the intestinal tract from the fermentation of fiber. And we see in colon cancer that those receptors are silenced. Like, those receptors don't work because those are the receptors that have anti-tumor and powerful anti-inflammatory effects. And in animal studies, when you take animals with colon cancer and you reactivate those receptors, nothing happens unless those mice are also given fiber that produces butyrate so that the butyrate can bind to it. And then you start seeing a regression of colon cancer. So we don't have any long-term studies in humans about the implications of being on a low or zero fiber diet for prolonged periods of time. But what we do have is a ton of animal data and completely uncontroversial mechanistic data showing that you're probably going to hurt your health if you follow a zero fiber diet for too long. And no, animal fibers like collagen, hair, bone, anything that's made from protein, that does not count.
Well, how much can they really get a day from that stuff?
Well, that's a good question. But hopefully not much, because yeah, it's a fiber and it's fermented, but it feeds the wrong type of bacteria. Any amino acid substrate that makes it down to your colon feeds pathogenic bacteria that produce numerous carcinogenic and genotoxic metabolites.
So either you have to follow a truly zero fiber diet, right, to mitigate that?
No, because if you eat protein, if you eat any protein, like you're a carnivore and you eat any protein, some of that protein is going to make it down there and build up these pathogenic bacteria. So then not only do you have a lack of beneficial substrate for your intestinal cells, you actually have a bunch of harmful substrate being produced that damages your intestinal cells. So it's really not a good situation to be in.
So what would you suggest if someone put themselves in that position with a low carb or ketogenic diet and they weren't eating plants?
Yeah, okay. If someone just absolutely does not eat any plants for whatever reason, then they need to supplement fiber. Like partially hydrolyzed guar gum is great. Acea fiber is great. Beta glucan is great, but they are going to need
soluble fibers tend to be more gentle on the gut.
Yeah, you're going to need, if you want to follow that diet, great, but you're going to need to supplement fiber.
What would you suggest if someone has already followed it, though, for a long time and they're just hearing this information? How do they repopulate?
There's
no data on that.
Yeah, we don't know how long it takes for any extinction or permanent changes to occur in humans. And so in animals, you see extinction after like 6 months, 6 to 12 months, you'll start to see extinction of these bacteria. And as they get desperate too, they start to eat away at the mucosal layer of the intestinal tract, which only
that's even worse if you're on a low carb diet, because you don't have the glucose to help the gut wall, right? The mucosal liner.
The mucus is made from carbohydrate. If you're not giving them that fermentable carbohydrate,
so it's already weak.
They're going to break down your gut lining to get the food that they want, because you're not giving it to them from your own diet. So that's just going to reduce intestinal integrity and promote endotoxemia even more. And really, I think if you've been following a low or zero fiber diet for a long time, that you need to take efforts to probably either supplement these fibers as much as tolerable. You can look into supplementing like sodium butyrate, so oral butyrate supplements that can make it down there. Those do exist. And also probably trying to repopulate through combining these supplements with mass doses of probiotics.
And fermented foods.
I mean, and if you can do it, really, suppository probiotics would probably be best, because those are getting right into the colon, or even a fecal transplant if things are super bad. And
what about a low fiber diet for constipation? Some people say that fiber causes constipation.
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on the type of constipation. There's a lot of types, and it depends on the cause. Some people are constipated simply because they don't have enough fiber, because they don't have enough bulkage to move through. Other people are constipated because they have issues with peristalsis, in which case adding more fiber doesn't make any sense.
It just makes them more bloaty.
Yeah, because their issue is that they can't move stuff through. It's not that there isn't enough bulkage.
That's seen a lot in bodybuilders and dieters, chronic dieters.
Yeah, because
right?
low
thyroid function.
So, I mean, it really depends on the cause. Related to this, there's also numerous intestinal pathologies like Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis. Those are inflammatory bowel diseases. And then you have irritable bowel syndrome. And all of these tend to have issues with fibers, most types of fibers. And that's because they're associated with dysbiosis. They don't have the right type of bacteria to ferment these fibers. And so all it does is irritate their gut lining,
Yeah, soluble
bloating
is
even
usually
more.
the most tolerated by those people.
They
have lists online.
I certainly think that zero fiber diets can be therapeutic, especially if you have an overgrowth of harmful bacteria already. Kind of like I think a carnivore diet can be very therapeutic as the ultimate type of elimination
Yeah, but
diet.
It's a Band-Aid.
Exactly.
It's not a solution when people are treating it.
It's not a long-term solution, no. If you're using it because you have intestinal problems, then all you're doing is managing the symptoms. Which
is no different than taking a pill.
Yeah, and there is, possibility.
Because you're still harming yourself.
Yeah, and there is possibility you're helping yourself by killing off some of the pathogenic bacteria. But if you don't take steps to repopulate it with the right types of fibers and right types of probiotics, then all you're doing is just creating more problems down the road. You're just addressing the symptoms for short-term comfort. And you're setting yourself up for a greatly increased risk of having some very severe intestinal pathologies in the long run, like colon cancer.
Colon cancer, yeah.
So yeah, those are kind of our thoughts on fiber. If
you can give us a like or share.
Yep. Give us a like,
Subscribe
a share, comment, subscribe if you like this stuff.
Ask any questions.
Yeah.